Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard and this is Lap of the World. If you watched our recent video where we took our 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo to the racetrack for the first time, you may have noticed in the in-car portions this device suckered to the windshield. The keen-eyed among you that have been following the channel a little longer may have noticed some differences with how the speed and GPS data displayed as opposed to previous videos. Differences in a good way. So, let's rewind a little bit then and talk about this new tool that we have, courtesy of the folks at Qstarz. So the kind folks at Qstarz reached out and asked if I would be willing to review their latest GPS lap timer if they sent it to me. I said sure, and so they have. I've just gotten this in the mail. It's a box. So let's do some casual unboxing and I'll show you what exactly came in the mail from Qstarz here. So in our initial package we have two boxes, one of which we will set aside for a little later. And this is the one that we are particularly interested in though. So in this snazzy carbon fiber looking magnetically closed box, we have the device itself, the Qstarz 8000GT limited edition. Also in here, we'll pull that guy out real quick, along with his foam surround. And then the little cardboard inner piece, we have it's a USB Type-C, very nice, USB Type-C cord. We have a rubberized protective cover here. Then we also have some warranty cards to register our product. We have those items, then a warranty card of course, and a nice looking Qstarz GT sticker. This package that we briefly neglected earlier was a little bit of an add-on. Just some accessories, but this is the, fish it out of here, this is the car mount, windshield mount for this thing, which clips on to the back. Before we fire it up and take a look at the software on board, let's take a look at the hardware it comes packaged in first. The Qstarz 8000GT comes in a robust feeling plastic case with a composite screen. The device is about 4.5 inches wide, 2 3/4 inches tall, and 1 1/4 inches thick at its thickest point. It weighs in just under 6 ounces, or around 164 grams. Mounting options should be plentiful given its dimensions. Most smartphone pinch clamps should work as long as the depth isn't an issue, but Qstarz provides you with a better option in the form of these two mounting lugs on the bottom and the back of the device. They are these sort of photography standard 1/4-20 threads, so if you have any existing mount, you should be able to quickly adapt it to support this device. So with that, let's move on to some screen peeling ASMR and then we'll fire this thing up. You turn the device on by pressing and holding the power button. It will cycle through a little bit of a warning that we'll get to later. One thing to note as we land on the home screen here is despite this being 2023, this is not a touch screen, and that's okay for one very specific reason. Most driving gloves do not have haptic pads on the fingers. They are more concerned with keeping you from being on fire than working on your smartphone. So instead we have buttons that we can use to navigate across this way or down this way. And they work pretty easily with gloves, and you can turn that beep on or off. On what I'm going to call your home screen here, the top row contains the functions that you are probably more likely to use often, with the bottom row being reserved for things to do with setup or connectivity. If you then click into any of these functions, you're presented with a sub-menu outlining various options within that discipline. Bringing it in close here for an important note, before you just chuck this thing in your windshield and go, you will want to make sure that it has the latest firmware installed on it. Mine was an early production model and so had some out-of-date firmware that I did need to update. I have talked to the Qstarz reps and they tell me that new units that you might purchase now will come with whatever the latest firmware is installed on them already. However, they are also continuing to iterate and improve the product and improve the firmware, so it's something that you're going to want to check for periodically. It's a very easy process to update the firmware either via the phone or desktop app. So with the basics and one important setup note covered, the next thing we need to do is get to a racetrack and plug this thing in a car. So we're now out here on a very hot day at Atlanta Motorsports Park, and we're going to stick this thing in the car and we'll show you what it looks like on track. So we selected circuit, race, it auto-detected AMP, after which we confirmed that, and then hit the start button to get the countdown. On the outlap, the only information displayed is the current speed. It's not until we cross the start-finish line for the first time that we get a timer display. Then, after the first flying lap, we will also get additional information about relative split times. Are you faster or slower than your previous lap? I found the size of the screen adequate for getting information at a glance, although I would prefer more color contrast versus the largely black and white display, with the only color being the relative pace indicator. This feels like a good time to hit some stats with the Qstarz 8000GT using a 25Hz GPS, meaning it's sampling at 25 times per second for your speed and position. Qstarz also advertises 14 hours of battery life, which seems believable given that our 40 minutes of use was barely notable on the charge indicator. The 8000GT is also IPX7 water resistant, so you can legit dunk the thing if you were so inclined, so range should be no problem. Qstarz also cites an operating temperature range from 22 degrees to 140 degrees F, or -10 to 60 degrees C, so this shouldn't have any overheating issues. 8 gigabytes of onboard data should be good in theory for something like 20,000 laps before it would need cleared. For our download session, we are back in the garage because frankly it was 90 degrees in the paddock and I wasn't too stoked to just sit somewhere and film something in the car at the time. But to look at the session that we just did, we have to navigate over here to history, boop into that, boop past our warning, go down here to circuit race, July, pick the date, which is the 12th, that's when we ran this. And then we've got our session here, and we can just click into that. And then we have our basics, just kind of your basic lap display here. Again, we only had a couple because there was a black flag, and then for mechanical reasons, we decided to take it to the house. But should you have more laps, you could scroll down between them there. And if you are interested in a particular lap between the two of them, you can click on that, click this, what's effectively the enter button, I'm going to call that. We've got this lap here, and you can go further into that, or I'm sorry, this direction. You'll see the GPS trace of the lap, and then if you go further, you can see a speed trace of the lap. Now this is very high level, and this is only what you get in the device. If you want to dig deeper than this, there is a way. You need to fire up our smartphone over here, or unlock it, and my fingerprint will actually work, where we have the Qracing app loaded on here. And you get a little bit friendlier view here. So we've got our selection here. We went into the history, go to circuit race, go to AMP there. And then the other cool thing you can do when you're in this view is you can actually pick which car it was that you were doing this with. And you can join a ranking thing. So if you're on the Qracing app or Qracing, you have a profile on their website, as of now, you can go and abuse my time on the on the internet with some trackday social media. And then we have this, and we can boop the lap, and it will actually give us a fairly robust real-time display where we can actually watch what we were doing, watch our speed trace as we're following around the track, and kind of understand where we're slow or fast. Apologies, I haven't switched the phone app to Freedom Units yet, but you can see this as it runs around. You'll be able to say, you know, that, and you can set this as kind of a reference lap if you then wanted to go back and try and improve your time. Now you'll notice in the Qracing app there is a second button other than history that says Start Race. You can, in fact, basically slave the device to your smartphone or to the app through your smartphone and use this to kind of do dual logging, if you will. So we're going to go over here. We don't have a track near us right now, so we're just going to click Simple Lap, which would let you kind of designate your own start point. And we can even tell it to turn our camera on here and use the camera in the smartphone to record video. And then we set up some comparisons. I think it was the display settings. Yeah, so you get a little bit, if you want a bigger display area and want to use your phone for that. And then you'd hit start. Once you actually crossed your designated finish line or the start finish of the track that you were at, it would begin logging and you would get the display on your phone, basically treating this as a 25 Hertz GPS and accelerometer. So you get the sensitive data, the extra sensitive instrumentation in the primary device. But if you want the larger display and or you want to just use your phone for this type of thing, so the data is on there and you don't have to deal with the transfer, you can do that as well. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. The other primary mode that the Qstarz 8000GT has is, of course, a drag racing mode. That's really not what we do on this channel, but I did promise the nice folks at Qstarz that I would overview the feature, so here we go. We're going to go into drag racing, tell it yes we want a quarter mile, and then tell it we want to start. Yep, okay, sure. 2, 1, and prepare for the slowest quarter mile ever, because we are in an office park and I don't want to go to jail. So that's giving us foot data as well as miles per hour and ET. Get to the 1,000-foot mark. Almost there. Slowest quarter mile ever. Slowest quarter mile on the internet. Courtesy of Lap of the World. So in addition to the quarter mile, you can also do time to speed, time to another specified distance that isn't a quarter mile, or a 0 to speed to 0 test, covering your usual magazine stat hit list. We're going to use our return pass here to also demonstrate the phone to device pairing function. So we've got our camera turned on, we're just doing another quarter mile, and we'll say start, and go again. Off to a blistering start here. And we should hit the quarter here soon. There we go. And we have the full data there. And we'll show you what the what video looks like once we're back in the shop. Now that we've actually done the runs there and had the video enabled, we can click on the quarter mile here, click on the pass that we were interested in, and then you can also, you'll be able to watch this in, watch this back with both the front-facing video, the overhead on the map view, and then the speed curve here. You can also then toggle between just the front-facing video, just the map view, or just the data curve. So in addition to the circuit racing and drag racing functions that we've already covered, there is a third function on here for data recording, and that is just open-ended logging. If you go into that, you can set up a few parameters here, and then if you click start, it's just logging data for you. It's going to record your speed, distance, and G's and things like that for whatever it is you might do. I could see this being potentially useful for, although you can't set up a start and finish line here, if you didn't have the opportunity to do that and you were running a hill climb or an autocross or something like that, you could still manage to pull data from it, although it wouldn't be quite as useful as far as recording a lap time or in the or a run time in autocross or hill climb or something like that. But it would basically just be open-ended recording for any driving you're doing. So, having now had our 8000 GT for a month or few, including now having taken it to a track, what do we think of it? Could I recommend this as a potential upgrade path from the smartphone app or stopwatch watching GoPro video or your spouse in the pit wall that you've been using for timing data to this point? Well, I will get to the recommendation and some other things, but first I did want to remind you in full disclosure that Qstarz did send this to us to review at no charge. However, they did send it to us to review, so I will have an unbiased opinion here and good and bad things to say about it. But speaking of which, let's get on with that in our last segment here, which is going to be our pros and cons, good and bad news. Anytime anybody asks me that question, it's always bad news first, so that's where we'll start. I don't have many nits to pick, but I do have a few, and we'll start with the more of a note than a nit, but the firmware update process. That's going to be fine for most people if you compare your smartphone to your Bluetooth headset or whatever the case may be. I think you'll be fine with it. However, there is a demographic of people out there who are not as technically savvy, and that could be seen having to plug the device into a computer or pair it with a phone and do an update ever so often could be seen as a challenge or nuisance, although it is very easy and there are good instructions available out there to do so, which I have linked in the description of the video. The only actual problem we had with the device in our case was connectivity, either to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi on to pair it with a phone. It did, every time, it did eventually pair, and we were able to get them to talk to each other just fine. However, sometimes it took a few tries, or we had to cycle the service on one device or the other, and I could see that being a point of frustration if you are limited for time, like in between track sessions trying to do a download. That would be annoying. However, this is very potentially, mileage may vary. Your Samsung, Google, or Apple phone may not have the same problem that my Motorola phone does. It could be a phone problem, not a device problem, but I did want to call it out as a challenge that we ran into. Putting my product specialist hat on, though, for a second, I would probably have a couple of recommendations for Qstarz here, and the first would be with the display. I think it would be nice to have some color and contrast options there. Right now it's kind of black background, white numbers and letters, and then the blue-green indicators for plus, minus in your splits or whatever it is, whatever you're doing there. First, there are colorblind people that have red-green issues, so those colors may not mean anything to some subset of people. Understanding that's a minority of the population, it would still be nice to be able to tailor the color and contrast on the device for the lighting conditions that you're in or other reasons. And then the last recommendation I would make would be for a truly consolidated documentation on how to do everything with the device. There is a quick start guide that I've linked below. There's an FAQ that I've linked below that answer most questions. However, there is no single how-to everything 8000 GT document out there right now. It's probably a great title for a video. If you want to see that, leave a request in the comments, and I will do it. I'll give the people what they want. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. 2 recommendations, one actual issue that we ran into, or one challenge we ran into, and then kind of a note on the firmware. But that's all we got for nits that I'm going to pick. Moving on to the good news then. I think at a high level, the goodest of news is that the 8000 GT accomplishes what it set out to, and that is creating a very robust standalone solution to get some really high resolution lap timing data into your car. The 25 Hertz GPS is segment leading, or it's at least tied for the lead in the segment. The device itself is also fairly compact. It doesn't take up much windscreen real estate, packs easily, has a wide thermal tolerance. It's not going to overheat like your GoPro, and it's also waterproof. So your rain, you can basically dunk it. You probably couldn't send it to the bottom of the lake, but IPX7 implies that rain should not be any issue whatsoever if you're using it on a motorcycle or open cockpit car. And speaking of those, while the included mount was just fine, worked for us at AMP, we used some curb, we ran over some rumble strips, and it stayed put. And it was also difficult to remove when we got back, which is a good thing. But I think having those mounting lugs on the back, I think that is a key inclusion and good forethought on their part for people who are going to need to have other mounting options other than a windshield mount. This leaves the doors wide open for all of the options there. The last thing here, I did also want to call out that they have a boatload of preloaded tracks. Pretty much anywhere you go, it's going to auto-recognize where you are. I bet we could probably fool it maybe with some of the really obscure places that we've been, but even then you do have the option to kind of create your own track and just tell it, hey, start-finish line is here, boop, and then you're good to go. But I doubt many people are going to go outside of its current knowledge base, and also they do update the, along with the firmware, they do update the track list periodically. So that is great. And then the last thing I had on here, which is kind of more of like that's a neat concept. I like what they're doing with the kind of trackday social media of having the Qracing app and website on which to which you can upload your times and compare them with other people. Ultimately, the success of that or the usefulness of that will be driven by how many the adoption rate, how many people are using the devices and going to the tracks that you can against which you can compare your times. But the concept is cool, and I like what they're doing there. I will give them a thumb up for that. So having now covered the good news and the bad news, where are we on a recommendation? I think I'm prepared to give this guy 1 4 fifths of a thumb up. I think people will still probably raise an eyebrow at the $600 price point. That is expensive, especially when you're like, yeah, but I can spend 20 bucks on a smartphone app. But you have to understand it's not the same thing. You're getting a standalone thing here that if you talk about also having to buy the smartphone that you were going to load the app on, it's all of a sudden looking really good for the 8000 GT. And there could be some situations and scenarios where that may be a thing. If you're using it in a team car as part of an endurance team or something like that with multiple drivers, you're not just going to throw one person's smartphone in there. And then even then, if you did, you'd have to find, you're then buying a separate GPS receiver and so on and so forth and getting them to talk to each other. So if you really do the numbers on it, it's a pretty decent value proposition for the resolution of data that you get. With that said, it did accomplish what I wanted to get out of it, which is getting you those smooth, sexy speed traces and track map traces of where I am when I do the overlays for the videos. Definitely production value increase as a result of using the device. So big thumbs up from me on that one, and something that I will definitely be continuing to use and you will continue to see on the channel more than likely. So with all that said, and with unbiased reviews given, I did want to take a second to thank the people at Qstarz for being both super responsive with all my questions, as well as reaching out to us and sending us a not inexpensive device to review and test on our channel as what is, for who are relatively small creators in the scope of YouTube. But hopefully I will just take that as a pat on the back, for we must be doing something right with the way that we review things and trying to be, unbiased and thorough about it. But that's where we're going to leave it. Hopefully you found the video informative, if not entertaining, and you got something out of this, or potentially opened your eyes to other options with respect to getting timing data in your car. If you do want to buy an 8000 GT, this has not been an ad, but I will leave a link in the description to where you can buy one. Thanks again to the people at Qstarz. Thanks to you all for watching. Until next time, I'm Richard. This is Lap of the World, and we'll see you all in the next video, if not at the track.